So is it cruising? Is it living on a boat? Is it going someplace on a boat? I don't know. How do you define cruising? Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. It's our 300th episode today. Can you believe it? How do you define cruising anyway? Maybe you've thought about living on a boat, or you've thought about sailing around the world, or maybe you actually haven't ever realized that people do live on their boats and go cruising. And cruising, in my definition, pretty simply, it's traveling around on your own boat. That's it. I'm not saying that there's any particular kind or size of boat required. There are people who are cruising on powerboats, people who are cruising on sailboats, people who are kayak cruising and rowboat cruising and houseboat cruising and catamaran cruising and all kinds of thing cruising. I suppose you could look at Kon-Tiki and Thor Heyerdahl and say that he was one of the original cruisers because he decided to cross an ocean on a raft. There are people who trailer their boats from one body of water to another, put them in the water, and happily explore wherever they happen to have landed. There's no mythical time caveat to cruising. In my definition, you're just as much a cruiser if you spend a night or a weekend away from the dock, exploring the coves 2 miles away, as you are if you're voyaging around the world. Now, what you need and what your experiences might be and what your expectations might be, they're going to be pretty different with those two definitions. But don't say one is a cruiser and the other one isn't. I don't think there's any shame needed in the conversation around what makes a cruiser. There's no list of required equipment. Oh, okay. Yep, by my definition of cruising, you have to have a boat. But other than that, nope, there's nothing else required. Because really, anything that you want to have on your boat really depends on you. If you've listened to this podcast before and you've heard me talk about it, you know that my favorite response when asked about just about every single aspect of cruising is, it depends. The thing is, you can look out there and see, if you Google living on a boat or sailing around the world or cruising, well, cruising isn't really going to get you anywhere. But if you Google anything like sailing around the world or voyaging around the world or taking a boat around the world or something like that, you're going to find incredible volumes of information. You're going to find a number of amazing YouTube channels that document people and the work that they're doing, getting themselves around the world on a boat. You'll find Instagram accounts that share heartbreakingly beautiful photos of what it's like to be out on a boat. And those things are great. They're incredible. It's so good to have inspiration. And those pictures and those videos, they're not made up. They're not somebody creating something other than the editing process, but they're not somebody creating something that doesn't exist out there. Those beautiful pictures of boats and beaches and palm trees and beautiful water, those are real. I've got a bunch of them on my blog, for sure. And I can tell you that I didn't Photoshop any of them. I don't have the time or the patience or the skill to be able to do that. But what I think sometimes is hard to find is all the aspects of cruising. Some of that is that as we're documenting it, those of us who are living it, it's a whole lot more fun to document the beautiful days than the days that aren't so great. But it's really hard as you're watching these videos and you're reading these blogs and you're checking out Instagram. There are a number of them. And there are a lot of them that just share the highlights. And it's not as easy to find the less pretty realities of that lifestyle. Although, let's back up a second and say, when you talk about parenting and you look at parenting, anybody ever seen a parent posting about their cute babies in the middle of a massive diaper blowout? Or day 3 of teething and no sleep? When you see houses for sale, do you see the realtor or the maintenance person or the homeowner posting about cleaning gutters by hand on a tall ladder that they've got a bucket in one hand and they're scooping the other stuff out of there that needs to then be carried down and it's super heavy? I don't think so. We tend to all love to share the highlights and not always the realities that are a part of any lifestyle we're dealing with. But if you're exploring the idea of cruising around the world or sailing around the world or living on a boat, what are the realities of that lifestyle? What are the things that maybe would be good to learn about before you decide if it's even worth learning more about it? I sign off most of my podcasts with, "I can't wait to see you out there." This is true. I absolutely can't wait to see you out there. Some of that is because I can't wait to get out there myself. The other part is that I really, really am excited about helping people get out cruising. But I want people to get out cruising who are enthusiastic and informed about it. It makes my heart hurt when I hear stories about people who sold everything, bought a boat, and set off cruising only to stop at the next port or a few hundred miles down the ICW and put the boat up for sale because they're totally disillusioned by this lifestyle, sucked in by the gorgeous Instagram photos and YouTube channels, not really knowing what it is that they're getting into. And I would much rather that you know what you're getting into from the very beginning. It may be that cruising is absolutely right for you, and it may be that cruising isn't right for you at this time, and it may be that cruising isn't really ever going to be something that you're up for or want to do. Any of those decisions is totally fine because it all depends on you. Sometimes you don't even know what you don't know. And it's really hard when looking through those YouTube channels and those Instagram accounts to even figure out what kinds of questions you might want to be asking. Other than the pretty standard ones, most people want to know about hurricanes and pirates. Yes, they do. But what about everything else that goes into it? What are some questions that maybe you should be asking yourself to see if it's worth exploring this lifestyle a little bit more? I've actually created a small course called Crash Course on Cruising that asks all kinds of questions, and in fact, asks you to ask yourself all kinds of questions that might help guide you towards the next step of figuring out whether cruising is worth exploring more. It's not that the answers are all going to be there, because they're not. There's way too much out there, and there's way too much experience that's out being shared by lots and lots of people. But what the course might help you do is just start understanding the scope of the questions you might be wanting to ask. And you never know. You might find the answers within you that you never knew you had because you didn't know what questions you weren't asking yourself. Cruising is pretty simply traveling around the world on a boat. The rest of it is so very much up to you. Thanks for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love sharing our information and ideas and thoughts and questions and answers with you. Because after all, we all start somewhere. Thanks for coming along with us on this ride. I can't wait to see you out there.